Okay, so now we're on to step 10. Step 10, we have the BB1s from bag B, BB1s. They're 3mm by 30mm screws, and again you notice these are the silver in colour, so denoted by the drawing being a light colour. And then BB6, so these are 3mm by 10, and we need 2 of those. And you'll notice again they are denoted with a grade colour, so that goes to the darker of the two. So we need 2 of those. So we need 2 each of those, and we are there, and that's all very good. So let's put this together. So what we need to do now is we're now introducing the gearbox into the chassis. So we'll bring the chassis into, and we are literally going to be putting the gearbox onto the chassis. We need to make sure we get the orientation correct. So if you can see here, these are at the bottom. So we are introducing these. So we need to, so I've got a feeling what we need to do, these were just temporarily put across, so that we remove those screws. So you can see here, remove the 3x8 screws, and we take these out and we slot this into the system there. So let's start with that. So we start by removing the 3mm by 8. So put those, what I'll do is pop those to side. There we are. There we go, that's those 3x8s removed, and we're now going to introduce I'm going to pop those into where the other ones are, just for safekeeping. I'm a little bit conscious of losing those, so making sure. So we're going to introduce that now into our gearbox using our screws. So just bear with me a second while I get my longer screws. There we go. So see here, it goes into our gearbox, and it goes in the chassis between this section here, and we need to pop that through. So we need to make sure that the top ones line up with the top ones, and the bottom of this lines up with these bottom ones. So it's just a case of slotting them through into position like so, lining those up. And what we're using the longer of the screws for the top ones. This is here. And I'm just going to jiggle until I find the hole. There we go. Excuse me, my Ronnie Barker days. So I'm just going to get a couple of threads onto that now, so that's sitting on that side. I'm going to do the same again with the small one. We've got the smaller screws onto the bottom, so I'm just going to tilt the chassis there, and then what I'm going to do is just I'm looking down the bottom hole. I'm just looking down just to line it up there, and I'm going to do is just going to drop that through, and then that should catch. There we go, catch some threads. Okay, so I'm not doing that too tight at the minute. I'm just nipped. So what I'm now going to do for ease, I'm going to spin the chassis around, and I'm going to do the top ones again, and again just pop that through. There we go, that's nicely lined up. And again, I'm going to eye through the bottom there. I'm just going to eye through and drop the screw, and it should catch the threads, which it does. And now what I'm going to do is I am now going to nip them up so that they're now nipped up. And it's just a case of, you know, again, don't go too mad. You know, you're not working on a full size, but you want it to be nice and reasonably tight. So spin round the chassis, pop that on there, and there we go. Nice and taut. Nice and taut. And the reason why I don't put the larger handle on the screwdriver is I know I'm a little bit heavy-handed sometimes, so I make the smaller handle screwdriver on purpose so you can't get so much leverage on it, so you can't overdo it. So anyway, there you are. That is step 10 complete. Step 10, and the gearbox is now on the chassis. Perfect. Okay, so now we're on to step 11, and the components we need for step 11 is our rubber gaiter that covers the drive shafts. This comes all in one piece, and we need 2 of the MD3, which are the drive shafts. They're like a dog bone style drive shaft. We need 2 of those, and we need our Tamiya anti-wear grease. So it talks about popping the anti-wear grease on the ends of your drive shafts and placing the drive shafts through the rubber gaiters. So we need to cut this according to what the drawing says, and if you look carefully at the drawing, it talks about, if I bring this in closer to here, perhaps might be able to bring a bit closer as well. Let's see if we can bring you in closer. Okay, so here we are, I brought you in a bit closer. And if you look at the drawing here, it talks about cutting the rubber boot so that the rubber gaiter here, this section is removed here, this central section here, and this end section here as well. So we're making this rubber boot to ensure that it's same as the drawing with the ridges on each side, and we're making sure that these all line up and make sure they're nice and cut. So that's going to be our next step. We're going to need to cut this to the right dimension of the drawing here, and there we are. That's what we're going to do next. So quickest way, I've done just a little test cut on one side. I tried using a knife and a ruler, but didn't quite get the desired finished. When you're sort of squashing down, it sort of makes it unloose. So the scissors, I think, is the best option here. So just want to follow the line as carefully we can, and we want to make sure we get that absolutely right. So just gently cut it along, and it's a case of, there we go. So that's nicely done. So that's the end piece. So they're the two end pieces I've now cut, and now I need to do 2 more cuts. That's here. So we need to make sure that we get this according to the drawing. So with this, so on the inside of this line here, and again, there we go. Just gently snip that through. So now you have you can see here, this ridge is this ridge here. As you can see, I've got this, and then you've got this central piece comes back up to this ridge, and you can see how I'm lining that up. So just making sure that I've got the ridges of the lower, and that's it. So that's one that's cut. What we need to do, we've got the outer side, and again, just carefully cut here. And then, so I'm just sort of following that across. There we go. And that's the other rubber piece. So now, again, moment of truth to make sure. Here we go. We've got our central ridge here, and we've got our central ridge on this side here, and our 2 high points, and our inner piece. There we go. So that's the 2 done and cut. So all I need to do now is grease these. So the way I've gone about doing step 11 is I'm not greasing the ends straight away. So I'm literally maneuvering the dog bone past this middle section because it's quite restricted, and you've literally got to gently ease it over so you don't puncture. So it's just a case of popping that through, and then once it's through, there we are, once it's through. So now what I can do now is I'll sort of pop some anti-wear grease on there and there, and then that way it sort of stays inside the boot, because as you can see now that that's in there, it's not going to go anywhere. You see, so the dog bone stays in. All right, so just popping some anti-wear grease on there. And just to show you there, look, just popping the anti-wear grease on, and then let that, there we go, there we are. So then now anti-wear grease is on, done. Step 11, all complete. Okay, so now we're on step 12, and step 12, we need some more components. So from MR, so MR6, we need a couple of these snap pins. This is, I think these are temporary solution just to hold things in. We need a couple of the 4mm O-rings, and again, just offer them up to the drawing and pop them across there. Oh, and just to make sure they are the right size, which they are. So there we go, I'll bring that back across. Now it does talk about using the plastic bearings. Now I've purchased with the kit a bearing upgrade straight away, so I purchased some extra 1150 bearings. So I'm going to be using, instead of the MD1 plastic spacers, I'm going to be using my bearings. So you need 4 of those. Then we need the shafts, the wheel axles. So you got 2 of the MD14s, where they're the longer style ones. Again, these are quite obvious, so no need to offer them up to the drawings. They are literally quite obvious. So 2 of the MD14s, 1 of the MD15, and 1 of the MD16. We're also going to need from our build the dog bone drive shafts that we put together in the previous step at the same time, and we're also going to need the rear trailing arms for both the left and the right. So the left and rear trailing arm is C6 and the right rear trailing arm is C9, and I have those here. And again, when taking them off the parts tree, just give them a little bit of a rub just to make sure you take off the little plastic nibs so they're nice and smooth, and it makes the model look good. And we're also going to need to do some more greasing. Right, so we now have all the components we need to put together step 12. Okay, so that's now step 12. Let's pop these components together. I'm going to do the left hand assembly one first, which is C6. So we're going to need to have one of our dog bones, and we're going to need our MD16 shaft, and all I've done here is just on a piece of bit of tissue paper, I've just re-greased everything ready for me, just to make sure that everything is all there. So on one side we're going to have the MD16 that's going to go in, and there's the anti-wear grease is already on the end of the dog bone, as you remember from the other step. So we're just going to pop that on there like that. So there we go. And then what we're going to do is just pull the gaiter back a little bit, and we're going to need to pop into one of MD14. We need to pop in one of these little rubber cushions. Ooh. He's disappeared underneath there, little greasy fellow. There we are. And that literally is gonna, I'm just gonna use my tweezers just to pop that in, and I'm just gonna pop him in there. Pop him in down into place. And there he is, he's in place. There we go. A little bit greasy on my fingers there, just like that. So we've got our, next we've got our end piece. So we take our 1/2 of our dog bone that's got the dog bone and the end of the shaft, MD16. We'll take our MD14. We've popped in our 4mm O-ring inside here, so we can now line that up with our dog bone. So they're now lined up, and what we need to do is pop on our, which would be plastic bearings, but I'm using proper bearings, so one of our bearings that goes in there like that. We then take the C6 and pop that into place, and there we go. So that bearing is sitting nicely in there. And then on the other side of C6 we pop our bearing. Again, you could, if you had the plastic spacers, you could use those, but we don't like plastic spacers, we like proper bearings. And we take one of our clips and we pop one of our clips through there to hold that into place. So the idea is you now have your shaft there, so you can just feel everything is in there. And we're going to now repeat that, and I'm just going to pop that on there. Just wipe my fingers a little touch, a bit of grease from the shafts. For the other side, which is going to be the C9, and we're literally just going to repeat and do the same thing. So there we go. So I'm going to get our on our longer MD14, I'm going to pop the other of the rubber O-rings into place, and yeah, you can see that, and just going to manipulate that into place with my tweezers. There we go. There we are. And we're going to need, on one side of our dog bone, we need MD15. So just going to, there we go. And then on the other side of our dog bone goes our MD14, like so. There we are. Then we're going to have a bearing. And then we're going to need our C9 part, which we're going to slide the bearing into. There we are. Okay. And on the other side of that, we've got our bearing. And our clip to hold things in place. So there you have now. You have step 12 completed. There you are. That's quite a simple step. Right, so now we're on step 13. Step 13, we need 2 of these rear arm stoppers. So there we are, I have 2 of those. And we need, from bag E, we need BE2, which are 4 of these 3mm by 10mm self-tapping screws. So I have 4 of those on here. And we are going to need a little bit of greasing on the rear arms and on some of the where they're attaching the rear arms, where you put the rear arm stopper. We're going to need a little bit of grease on here, just to help with the wear and help with the movement. So they're the components we need for step 13. Here we go. Right, so here we go. So I've, on the rear trailing arm assemblies, what I've done is I've popped a little bit of grease on the left hand rear trailing arm, so C6. I've popped a little bit of grease on there ready, as you can see at the ends here and here. And again on C9 for the right hand rear assembly, I popped a little bit of grease on the areas that are indicated on the drawing. So now that they're all pre-greased, we need to bring the chassis into play, and again keeping the orientation, and to make it easier, I'm going to do, for camera, I'm going to make it do the right hand side one first. So just slightly move that out of the way. Take this C9, which is the right hand one, so just refer to step 12 for the which is right and left, and it tells you, if you look on here, it tells you when we did this, C6 was the left and C9, this one was the right hand assembly. So we're going to take the C9. So we have to, on here, we have to pop the shaft here which was MD15. We've actually got to pop that through the hole in the gearbox. So we're going to do that. Go. And then what we need to do is we need to pop the end into the top hole, which is, there's only one hole it will go into. There we go. And that now lines up with the chassis in this section here. It now lines up, and we're going to pop on here one of the rear stoppers, the rear arm stopper. We're going to pop that on here. Doesn't matter which way around these are, but I believe there is one side shinier than the other, so don't think it makes much difference, but yeah, there we go. So that goes on, and we're going to pop that on with a couple of the screws, and as I've already said, I've already popped a bit of grease in there so to make that work. So there we go. So we line that up and take our self-tapping screws that we have, and we got our self-tapping screws, which are the 3x10mm self-tapping screws. And I'm just going to pop the first one in. Oh, excuse me. Try and do this one-handed at the same time. So yeah, there we go. I've found it there. That's better. So let's take the main handle off. So there we go. A couple of threads on there now. So there we are. That's one side, and that's on the other hole. And then we're going to tighten those so that they hold. This is why I put the extension on, because you need a little bit more torque on here to get these in, because they're quite big screws. Go. Take your time. There we are. And again, so tight and then a quarter. Tight and then a quarter. That's all you need. Okay, so that would be the rear. And what we need to do is the other side. So I'll show you the other side, which is exactly the same. So again, already pre-greased the holes, popping the shaft that we had, the MD16, through the gearbox. So it lines, popping C6 into the hole, lining things up. So there we are, our plate. There we go. And then we take our screws and pop them into the holes, and we tighten them down. I'm just going to torque the other one down a bit as well. So it's tight. Now extra turn, tight. There we are. Okay, and then we've got our suspension travel. Okay, there we are. So now we have step 13, and that is now completed. And we have our step 13 on there for you. Yeah, so I'm just trying to maneuver that so you can see. Yeah, there you go. So according to step 13 is now completed.